to your last point in terms of that? Why was it a tough show to storyboard?
Man, okay. So I think Blue Eye Samurai was technically my first like adult animation
Okay.
show that I worked on, which was really exciting. I always wanted to do something like that, and it's like, oh man, my actually like when I joined DreamWorks, well, what made it difficult was they were very specific with some of the notes and a lot of the setups because like a lot of the directors or some of the directors come from live action, so
Sure.
trying to calibrate live action terminology.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Suuuper Anime Podcast. Once again, I am lost for words with our guest today. Our guest today is a multi-award-winning story artist with over 600,000 followers across YouTube, Instagram, and X. Our guest today has worked on epic feature films such as How to Train Your Dragon, series such as Invincible 2, Blue Eye Samurai, and the live-action movie Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But it doesn't stop there. He has multiple independent award-winning works of his own. He's the founder of Brushtail Work Studios, Inc. Ladies and gentlemen, all our super lights, give a warm welcome to Toniko Pantoja. Thank you so much Toniko for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Oh man, you sound more accomplished than I usually am.
Nah, you're way
Oh,
you're way so accomplished. Like literally, usually like I have this structure in terms of this and that. But as I mentioned to you in the green room, I was just binging on your content, especially when it comes to the productivity elements and just the different ways in regarding your creative process. Before we get into that, there's one thing I do like to ask all guests is, what's something that people don't know about you that you'd like to share to them on the podcast today?
I have a twin brother.
No way. Okay. Is that identical or non-identical?
It's non-identical, so fraternal. He also does art.
Yeah.
No. Oh, I have a twin brother and my sister. Her name is Toniko Pantoja. She's a comic artist. So yeah, you can search her up.
Okay. Fair play. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. Like I said, I usually have this whole structure, but I'm gonna go straight into the deep end in this because, yeah, talk to me about edging. What? Because when I saw that video, it was such a great title, by the way. And it was very much brought into life, and people were like, Edgin, where's this? It's not that kind of podcast, people. We'll get there, but Toniko has a great video, and I'll link it in the show notes about Edgin. And I find that very hard. I found the video very insightful, but I myself find it very hard to do. Do you mind just quickly explaining to people what you mean by edging in the concept of being creative?
Oh man. Okay, yeah. Like, are you putting me in the spot to explain it? But without getting too detailed into like what edging is, it's the idea of like holding back.
Yes.
Holding back and like and that can mean a lot of things. But my creative journey recently, especially when it comes to like my own personal work, it's how do I make something without like putting 100% of my energy and my efforts and time into something, because I feel like I get burned out easily when I'm like putting all of my efforts into something. So like I think another idea of like holding back is giving yourself constrictions and restrictions. So an example is like learning how to work with limitations. Like one of the problems I had, especially with animation, is I over animate. Lots of drawings, lots of in-betweens, and it amounts to nothing. What if I could do the same idea, but I only use like 4 drawings or 5 drawings? And that's why I like watching anime, because usually it's like shots aren't super like highly detailed animated. Sometimes it's just a still drawing, but it leaves us an impact, a memory, because it's so memorable of how intense that drawing looks, even if it's still. So like it's just this idea of learning how to work with constrictions and limitations, because I do firmly believe that creativity arises from like working with whatever tools that you're given.
No, and thank you very much for summarizing that. I think the 3 things you talked about was holding back on your resources, holding back your capabilities, and if I remember the benefits of like holding back, and you've mentioned some of those, especially in terms of limitation and creativity. I was speaking to Vitali, who directed on one of the episodes of Love, Death, and Robots, and he mentioned, I don't know if it's his specific quote, but he mentioned that limitation is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
And I think when we're looking at, from my standpoint anyway, there's one thing you said, I think I equated it to like the consumer dilemma or the analysis paralysis. You gave I can't remember specifically, but you gave like an analogy of someone who has 2 options versus someone who has 7. And a guy of 2 or a girl of 2 made more of it than the person with 7. And I think we can get over paralyzed with too much choice as it relates to choice architecture. I myself find it so hard, especially when it comes to like editing my video, or maybe I probably overanalyzed and went through all your videos and so on and so forth, because I like to over prepare as it were. But then I guess sometimes when you over prepare, or you're, I guess, too much information, it can maybe be it can let go of the discovery phase, as it were, which is probably now evident. Like, this, that, so on and so forth. But no, I completely agree with that. And I'm trying to, like you mentioned, just do more with little, or do less, sorry, in terms of what I currently do for the podcast, in terms of how can I be more creative with little? And it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. I get that. I know. I mean, this is coming from someone who also has the paradox of choice issue. Like for me, I mean, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. I think I was told I had ADHD as a kid, but I think part of that is like it's very hard to like make decisions. Like even like with deciding what I want to do. Like if I want to I want to do comics, but I also want to do animation, but I also want to illustrate, but I also want to write, but I also want to learn all these things. And there's just a lot of choices for me to do with little time. And when there's a lot of choice, like sometimes like, oh, a lot of choices, that sounds amazing. But at the same time, it's like so overwhelming to the point where it's kind of like anxiety inducing.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like the idea of just like, having like a few choices, or, not having a lot of choices, and you just have to work with that. And really like focus in on that. I know like so I practice jujitsu, and
Nice.
there's like a trending like type of practice that a lot of coaches have been doing, which is like constrictive based or restrictions. So like these are games where, let's say it's like learn how to take down a person, but you can't like grab their head, you can't grab their wrist, you can only like focus on their legs. And I think that encourages like someone to be a bit more like creative and to really trust their own instincts in that moment. But you're only focusing on like these restrictions.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like debate and controversy with that type of practice. But I personally think as an artist, because like, I animate too, I've been seeing the benefits of that sort of restriction and that limitation that I have to work with, just because like it just allows me to just problem solve that that issue.
No, absolutely correct. There was a case study done on ice cream, and the ice cream business with, I think it was 3 choices, was actually doing better than the ice cream shop, which had like 14 choices, because people were so overwhelmed that they just didn't know what to choose and just ended up leaving, or they would buy an ice cream and then regret, buying that specific flavor because they thought the other one would taste better. Whereas to your point, if you give people just a limited amount of options or restrictions, one, there's less choice, or sorry, less choice, but there's less analysis paralysis. There's more of a, okay, I can be decisive. I only have three options, so I have a 33% choice or chance of being wrong or right in that case. So no, you're absolutely right. And yeah, sorry I started in the deep end, but I really thought that was a really good video, and I just wanted to highlight that specifically around the creative process. And I think a lot of people get in their heads regarding creation and so on and so forth, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have so many options outside, but it's also sometimes, like you said, in your head, I want to be a comic artist, I want to be this, I want to be that. You're just kind of too kind of scattergun where you need to like be more focused on one or two things. So I thought that was really good. I really, really liked that video.
Thank you so much.
No, no worries. Another thing you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, you said you like to talk about the creative process and the mindset in relation to in relation to it being an interesting topic. So let's talk about the creative process. What is your creative process with regards to the stories that you create for your specific animated shorts or animated films that you done, which were award winning, some of them. So what is your creative process? Because I know there was another video about you talking about it's not necessarily failure, it's just more so data gathering, if I'm correct in saying
Yeah.
yeah.
I think like it's so easy to see like errors and mistakes and failure like, or when something doesn't plan out your way, you see it as a failure.
Yeah.
But I think it's better to look at it in a way where you're collecting data, or you're learning from it. Like, this project wasn't it didn't hit the mark that I wanted, but here's where I can like mitigate all the issues that I went through.
Yes.
So I've always been in a way where, and I don't think I was aware of this until like much later in life. When you're younger, you have such insane standards for yourself where like you're much harder on yourself. So I think like when things don't work out my way, I try to see it more as like an acceptance, and like, okay, what can I just focus on like what I gained from it? And that actually would help influence my overall creative process, where things can go more smoothly. So like I think one of the things that I learned about myself recently, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have been when I had to talk about this, and a lot of people have been finding it somewhat helpful, where I've learned to sort of like divide what parts are like the creative parts of a project and what parts are just like laborious. Creative stuff is like decision making. Like, what idea, like I have this idea, where should I take it? I can go this way, I can go this way. So it's just a lot of like decision making and trying to figure out what this thing is. And the labor stuff is like, like cleanup and color, or just things that's like, if I just like move forward with this task, it'll get done. And in animation, for me, that's like the mundane, laborious work of cleaning up lines and coloring that those frames. So like I try to do all the stuff that requires me to be creative and loose. And like not super precious, but still like the idea is there. And anything that's related to like finessing, tidying it down, making it clear, that I would consider laborious. And that's when I can turn on podcasts. I can watch a movie while doing it. It's more just like that part becomes more like the marathon for me. Like I'm just pacing myself through it.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. It's almost like there's a book I read. I'm not sure you've read it as well. I close my eyes when I'm thinking. Sorry, but I think it's Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
I haven't read that one. No,
it's really good. He talks about System 1 and System 2, and basically one is unconscious bias in terms of things that you just see and have an unconscious bias to. And then I think System 2 is the actual effort that you make. I might be getting them wrong way around, but essentially they're two systems, right? And he basically says you need to lean into the system more where there is an unconscious bias, where you're actually making decisions based on rationality, or based on data, or based on preconceived conceptions that you've essentially got from the environment you're in. So I think the reason why I was saying that is just more so because we can sometimes just fall into just doing stuff without actually thinking about it. So it's good for us to be a bit more, to your point. Okay, this is my creative time. I'm going to use System 1 to get the juices flowing, think about things. Maybe System 2 can just be like, your brain is just automatically there. So when you're doing like the laborious stuff, like you mentioned, it's not necessarily you're thinking too much. It's just more so kind of business as usual. I'm listening to a podcast, I'm watching TV, but I'm doing something else. So your brain is almost like it's not shut off, but it's just kind of like in autopilot mode, if that were.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah.
Like if I were just to quickly summarize the creative process and in relation to the systems and
Mm.
what I was just talking about, it's like, let's say I have an idea for a short, stupid cartoon.
Yeah.
And the process of animation, there's just a lot of steps and a lot of things to consider. And lately, just trying to problem solve one step at a time. So I'll start with just like writing log lines of like, oh, this is an idea. These are ideas. And then once I finish writing the log lines, maybe I'll write like a paragraph that summarizes what the short is. And then maybe I'll turn that into a script, especially if it has dialogue. But usually I'll just like make a very casual script or just jump straight into like thumbnail storyboarding where the storyboards are just loose, but the staging and the ideas are there. Then I'll probably like tidy up those storyboards and then I'll like move those storyboards into like my animation files where I can like draw over them and animate them. So it's just like, moving one step at a time, and I don't like go to the next step until like that thing is done, just so that like I again just keeping my head free from a lot of things, just like focusing on one thing at a time. And for me, that's been helping me mitigate that feeling of being burned out.
Because you're not overwhelmed with like a million things to do. You're focused. Yeah. Yeah. And like I mentioned, we have listeners all over the world, so we're always trying to add value. And this, I'll tell you, listeners, go to Toniko's. I'll put it in the show notes. His YouTube, because there's a lot of productivity, and especially I know a lot of our audiences are artists or aspiring artists, animators. There's a lot of great information on there. So definitely go there to essentially check out his stuff. Okay, cool. So obviously you got in your internships, then you worked your way through the industry. Let's talk about Blue Eye Samurai, because I know that's more so Netflix. I know that was probably more so after you've done a lot of work on DreamWorks. How did that come about, and what was your role there? And I know there was one video. I didn't want to watch it to my point about knowing too much and not asking the right questions. But one of the videos you said was Blue Eye Samurai was a tough show to storyboard. So, I guess three-prong question. When did you get onto Blue Eye Samurai? What was your role? And then to your last point in terms of that, why was it a tough show to storyboard?
Man, okay. So I think Blue Eye Samurai was technically my first like adult animation
Okay.
show that I worked on, which was really exciting. I always wanted to do something like that, and it's like, oh man, my actually like when I joined DreamWorks, I actually got to do work for VeggieTales, so
Okay.
that was pretty sick. And then it's like, oh, kids, children's cartoons
Yeah.
to like Blue Eye Samurai. Okay, let's go. Um, I got in. I was in at Netflix internals. I just wrapped up, or I was wrapping up on this other production called Magician's Elephant, and I think they were looking for places to put me in after Magician's Elephant internally. So I put in all these shows I was interested in, and I think I'm 100% sure I put Blue Eye Samurai as up there. And then I had an interview with Jane Wu at the time, who she looked at my work and said, I like that you're fast, and you're fast at boarding. We want to see what you can do on a production like Blue Eye Samurai. So I think it was around like the start of 2020.
Okay.
That was when I got onto Blue Eye Samurai.
Yeah.
And I was a board artist. And at the very end of my time there, I was doing some animation tests for some of the characters, and that was more for like a reference for the character design more so than like character acting or like how the characters would look when they behave a certain way. And I did that in 2D, but I think that show was really interesting. There were some like really funny things about like the things that we should draw and what we shouldn't draw. It was what was kind of difficult too. Well, what made it difficult was they were very specific with some of the notes and a lot of the setups, because like a lot of the directors or some of the directors come from live action. So trying to calibrate live action terminology and filmmaking with like animation board artists
Yeah.
and trying to get that uh to work together. And it was a learning experience because
Mm.
my only experience with live action was with Sonic 2 at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So like they were also very cautious about using live action terminology, which I had to sort of relearn. I get things mixed up all the time, especially when it
Okay.
comes to like describing lens length and focal length. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and like yeah, talk like when I chose shots, like this is shot in like a 55 millimeter lens, a 35 millimeter lens. So it was just stuff like that.
Mm.
In animation, especially when it's 2D, it's like it's easy to just use pan for the camera, like pan this
Yeah.
camera. But in live action, it's like you got to use terms like dolly or truck in, truck out, boom, to
Okay.
describe very specific camera moves. So
Interesting.
that was like for me, it was a huge learning experience.
Mm.
Um, I think the hard part was like um so some of the directors I worked with were very specific
Mm-hmm.
with some of the notes, so I would end up redoing stuff a lot. Just because like it was also very liquid where ideas change or things
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
while
I
we're
hear that.
boarding.
Yeah.
So that was also like hard to sort of juggle with. But I learned a lot of like learning how to uh think about scenes as if they were shot in live action where it
Mm.
like instead of because in animation the camera placement can be limitless, but in live action it's like you have like maybe a few cameras that are like master shots of a
Yeah.
scene and they're just edited together. Some were punched in, some were like further away, but trying to think about my camera shots more economically helped a lot.
Okay.
um and it's stuff that I constantly have to remind myself too. But it was just like a a good learning experience about learning how to board in a way where you can play around with it during edit too.
Mm. No, that's and I was so not. I did not know about the different terminology between live action and animation. So I appreciate you sharing that industry knowledge again because I think I say this all the time. We see the final product and we think, "Yay, someone just drew it," and then it all happened. But you're talking about lenses and panning and so on and so forth. There's a lot that goes into a show or whether it be live action or animation. I know when I spoke to Ian, he mentioned like one episode for Invincible takes like 6 months. So
Mm.
I assume that's the same with maybe Blue Eye as well in terms of the creation and from beginning to the end.
That's a good question because Blue Eye Samurai and Invincible, from my experience, they're very different in how it was structured. So
Okay.
there are times where like I'll work on one episode and then I'll work on another episode and I'll come back to rework or re-edit some of the previous work on a previous episode.
Mm,
So it for me it was hard to kind of gauge that. With Invincible because things were a lot more punctual and streamlined.
mm,
Like you can tell where when boards start, when boards end, and then it'll make its way to like edit and stuff like that.
yeah.
With Blue Samurai, I think like I was given certain dates of like, oh, I'm on the sequence. When does it
Mm,
end? I feel like Blue Samurai was closer to working on a feature because that it's very liquid.
yeah.
Where Invincible, um, you try to be as figured out as possible.
Mm, okay. Interesting. No, no. I mean, I really enjoyed Blue Eye Samurai, so kudos to you and the team on the work on that. It does give that Kill Bill vibes. I don't know if you've seen Kill Bill, but it definitely does give that vibe. But again, I think to your point, the camera work and everything there, what was done and how it was shot. I think that's why it was such a cultural phenomenon when it came out. And I think there's going to be a season 2 coming out as well. So I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to that.
the thing is that like when I was working on the show, we had no. I mean, maybe I'll just talk about myself, but I had no idea how it was gonna turn out or how it was gonna look.
Mm,
That's usually the thing when you're working on something like brand new and original. You just don't know how it's gonna come out. I'm really happy that people do like the work that everyone put into Blue Eye Samurai. because like when I was on it, I just didn't know like where it would go, how it would turn out. But at the end of the day, I think you can tell that it was a project that a lot of people were really just trying to like figure out and make it work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they did for me. I'm not an artist, but it looked great to me. So, appreciate you sharing that knowledge there. What would you say to younger self if he was listening today?
Um, just I would say keep making stuff. Uh, keep keep making stuff that seems relatable to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
don't try to worry about looking cool or try to impress other people,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, you're gonna be chasing something that the more you chase it, when you're not really enjoying it, the more you're not gonna be happy with yourself. And if you keep doing things that feels genuine to you, you're more likely to do amazing things with it. Um,
Mm.
I think yeah, sorry. What I'm trying to say is that worry less about trying to look cool, worry more about being genuine with the things that you make.
No, and I completely agree with that. I was listening to a podcast. I don't even know a guy called Tim Ferriss.
Mm.
Uh, he was. There's one thing he said is like you need to be careful of how you're shaped by your audience. If you allow yourself to be shaped by your audience feedback, you become a caricature of your most extreme behaviors and beliefs. So if you sustain that long enough, you'll become the mask that you're wearing in a sense. So don't be shaped too overly by the audience. Or he was talking about Google and YouTube as well. He say don't be overly shaped by the audience and algorithm. So people who just be creating things just because people whether it's trending or whether people are saying, you have to watch this or you have to do this, so on and so forth. He was just like, don't be shaped by that. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, yes, create what you like, right? In that sense, create what makes you happy. Create what makes you feel joy. I think a lot of people do things for others just because they think it'll get them clicks. I know this
Yeah.
is the world we live in, and sometimes they're not happy doing that content. They just do it for the clicks. Whereas my standpoint is, look, I'm just gonna invite the guests I love. I'm gonna do the podcast episodes I like. I don't necessarily want to, do something just for the sake of doing it. I think one of the things he says is being efficient without regard to effectiveness is the default mode of the universe. And I think that's how everyone operates, we need to be not just efficient, but also effective as it were. So,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's so I didn't even think that I would get affected by like the whole YouTube space or algorithm or things like that or likes and
Mm,
stuff, but it subconsciously like affected me where the less likes I got on something, I thought I was doing something wrong. And then I started comparing myself to other people who were doing really, really well. And I was envious of their skills too. So I would try to like make stuff that was similar to their work or in that vibe. And I think you can learn a lot from that, but at the same time, it's so easy to get lost in who you are as an individual. And
yes.
I didn't realize that until like I saw everyone else doing very similar things, where it was always like these guys feel like they're trying to one up each other, and a lot of the stuff that was being pumped was like I'm gonna remember this now, but I'm probably not gonna think about it like later down the line. And I think that's kind of why like I started resorting to like making really dumb, funny things to see what makes me laugh. Hopefully, it'll
Mm.
make others laugh, and then maybe I can find my own voice. Just trying to have fun again, and then I can start being, serious and thoughtful again.
But I mean, look, I know we were nearly at the end, but just to very wrap this up, it's just more so. I think it's I see that love being reciprocated by your audience, right? You've grown your channel to a very massive following. And I imagine you're doing it just because you're doing the things you love, as opposed to trying to pander for others or pander for the audience. Maybe at a time you did, or maybe didn't. I don't know your whole journey, but with regards to the latest videos I've seen, I did also see the one where he says I'm not a YouTuber, but I can see that you're doing things that you want to talk about, right? Not just like you said, industry stuff and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
and again, people are receiving it well. So I think that your voice has been shown and is being shown to people who are receptive of it regarding your creative process. So yeah, you've done well.
Thank you,
Awesome stuff.
man. I
No, no
like.
worries.
I think when I like. Oh, sorry, I just lost my chain of thought. But I think it came to the point where like I didn't have joy like talking about the industry, or like I do, but I don't want to make my whole identity or channel like about the industry. Like
Correct.
if let's say I strip away my involvement with Invincible or Blue Eye or all these, let's say, prolific shows that I worked on,
Mm.
um, what would I be? And that's kind of why
Mm.
it's like I want to focus more on like who I am as a creator.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, that stuff will encourage everyone to make stuff. I think it's really cool to see people make things too. Just talk about like the sensitive nature of like making something where it can be both vulnerable and both like strengthening.
Yep.
Um, and like the type of things that I want to contribute to like animation because I want to like see new things come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us want to kind of not be self-identified with one specific thing, especially if we are more than just that. And to your point, you are more than just working at DreamWorks or Netflix or so on and so forth. You have a lot of different skills, a lot of different interests, passions. And that's what I found refreshing about your YouTube channel. And I think that's why it's doing so well, because you add so much value to the audience.
Thank you, man.
Showcase your process. You give great advice, not just around art, but you kind of like and watch the videos where you are doing like your anime storyboarding, but you're talking about productivity, or you're talking about like 3 skills I learned about so and so so forth. So I think they're very very informative and very instructional, and I can tell you take a lot of time and do a lot of work in creating your notes to give great great instruction, or not instruction, but great, I would say, great advice based on your experiences. So thank you so much for giving that to the world. So appreciate it.
Of course. No, thank you
No
so much for the
worries.
kind words.
Oh, I know this. Click on the next video before he lets it off. Impeccable form, by the way. And the Hunter x Hunter drip is get out of there. It's still there though. Yes, but in his mind, it's gone.